Welcome for the very first time to a Reading Journal monthly setup. Today we're setting up my January intro page and calendar in my 2025 Reading Journal, and I'm seriously so excited, so let's dive in. If you've never seen my face or journals before, or even if you have, hey there, I'm Emily, and I'm so happy to have you join me today for some journaling. This is my 5th year keeping up with a reading journal, and I've discovered that most of the time I'm very much a maximalist when it comes to my monthly intro pages and my yearly themes and such. And then I tone it back a bit in my actual book spreads to make it a bit more manageable, but keeping in line with that, this spread is very involved and maximalist just the way I like it. Pretty much every year that I've been doing any kind of journaling, whether that be bullet journaling or when I moved on to my reading journal a few years ago, something about the new year and January always just screams Art Deco and Nouveau to me, so I almost always end up with something that at least takes pieces of inspiration from those art movements. This year I'm going with this kind of celestial sky and moon and sun piece, and I'm keeping the color palette pretty two-toned but adding in a lot of variation in those two colors. Like I said, this spread is very involved, so I'm using some gouache paints for the sky background. First going in with this darker blue. I was originally kind of trying to go for a navy color, but as you'll see as I paint more and more of this little piece, this color brightened up a lot as it dried, so I ended up with a bit more of a saturated royal blue in color in the end, but I think it still works pretty well. This darker blue is going in all of the areas outside of the middle circle that kind of extends past the sun and clouds, and also inside the moon area where normally the inside of the sun would sit. I also originally was going to have a little bit of a border at the bottom where the title of this went, but I decided mid-painting that I didn't actually want to do that and just wanted to write the title in on top of the sky background instead of having any kind of designation or differentiation between the title and the background, so I painted over that pretty quickly in the process. Like I said, I'm also going to be painting this inside of the moon area with the darker blue as well. So just going in and doing that once I've finished up the outer sky, making sure that I don't paint over any of the moon, as the paints that I'm going to be using for that later on are less opaque than these paints. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to paint over with too many layers of that dark blue background. And also painting around these little planets that are hanging down from the moon as well. Those are going to be filled in with a paint pen later on, but I wanted to make sure that the paint didn't get all in those, so I didn't have to do too many layers of that either. Once that dark blue is all in there, I'm going in with this lighter blue, which is closer to a sky blue kind of color, and this is just going in that area in the middle circle that's outside of the moon and inside of the sun, if that makes any sense at all. Gouache can be a bit hard to use in a typical notebook or journal, so if you want to try to replicate this, I would be a little careful and light-handed with the water. Thankfully, I'm using a pretty sturdy journal with 160 GSM paper, so it doesn't wrinkle up too much and it didn't bleed through at all, but using any kind of paint, especially water-based paint, has definitely been a learning process over the past 8 years that I've been journaling in some format. Again, with this layer, I'm being pretty careful to try to not go inside of the sun area at all, but also making sure not to go in the cloud area at all. As for the clouds, I am just going to leave that the journal white and not fill that in with any markers or color or anything, and just outline that out later on. After the gouache is all laid down and mostly dried, I'm pulling out my absolute favorite paints I own. If you have seen me around other places, you'll definitely have seen these before, and if you decide to stick around here, you will absolutely see these again, probably sooner than later. These are the Colero Colors Pearl Color watercolors. That's kind of a mouthful, but they're these really lovely metallic watercolors, and I have 2 sets of them, so I have quite a variety of colors I can use with these. The first thing I'm going to do with these is I'm going to go in with this lighter white gold color for the moon, so that it has a paler and cooler tone to it than the sun. These do take a couple of layers to become fully opaque because they are watercolor, so I'll have to kind of hop back and forth between the 2 colors, but I'm going in with this deeper, true yellow gold for the sun to make it really have a different tone and color than the moon. While I'm hopping back and forth between these 2 colors to make them fully opaque, I wanted to mention something kind of fun I'm doing for all my monthly themes this year. You may have noticed, or maybe not, as I can never tell how niche this is, but I am going to either lightly or heavily base all of my themes on tarot cards this year. I'm not super experienced in tarot, but I do have a few decks, and I've always been drawn to it in my adult life, and I felt like it would be kind of a fun way to explore it more and also kind of put my intentions into each month. And I also just really love all the incredible and really unique art that can be present in tarot cards. So this month is obviously the moon, but also a little bit of the sun. The moon is often in tarot kind of a deceptive card and indicates hidden things, but I usually take a bit more of a mysterious reading with it and take it to mean that something unknown is coming, which is kind of the perfect card for the opening of a new year. Contrarily, the sun card often indicates joy, success, and clarity, so pairing it with the unknown and mysteriousness of the moon in the opening of the year is kind of me manifesting good things and clarity for the year, especially in my reading since this is my reading journal. Overall, I'm just really excited to explore this year and this kind of little tie-in that I'm going to have. I'm not going to be too strict about it with keeping them all looking the same. I'm kind of pulling from the fact that there's a lot of different tarot cards that have a lot of really wide variety of art on them, and so each month is going to have a very different style, but the cohesiveness is just going to be that they're all either heavily or lightly inspired by a various tarot card. And I'm really excited to just share with you what tarot card I picked as each month comes by. All right, now that I've given you a little hint into what the rest of my monthly themes are going to be based around, we are finally nearing the point where this watercolor is opaque enough for me to start outlining. We're on the last layer of me doing paint on this. Finally, it took quite a while in real time. I had to keep going over it, but I think it was well worth it. I really love how metallic and beautiful it turned out. And I just always really love the way these paints look both on and off camera. Like I said, if you've been around for a while, you've definitely seen me use these paints before, and if you plan on sticking around, you will for sure see me use them again. They're some of my favorite stationery craft paint products that I own. All right, it is finally time for me to start outlining all of this. I originally tried to go in with a Pigma Micron for all of this outlining, but the pen really did not want to stick to the gouache for some reason. I could not figure out what was going on, but every time I went over any of the gouache, it just did not want to stick. It did still work on top of the metallics, as you can see me outlining over that, but for the actual outlining of all of the elements that kind of intersected with the gouache, I had to go in with a different pen, and I just ended up using my trusty old Inkjoy gel pen for all of that outlining, since that didn't seem to have a problem with the gouache at all, but that did mean that it was a little liquidy and was in a danger of smearing, so I had to go a little slower than I would have had to go if the Pigma Micron had stuck to the gouache at all. The Inkjoy also, whenever you use a gel pen, it's a little harder to layer it, and sometimes if you try and go like back and forth over the same spot, it will just wipe away the gel pen and nothing will stick to it anymore. So even though I used the majority the Inkjoy for outlining all of those elements, there was also some points where the gel would not stick anymore because I tried to outline parts that were had a little bit of a gap in between them, and so then I had to kind of do multiple layers of pens. I had to do the ink joy that had kind of smeared away and then go in with a really thick nib of the Pigma Micron on top of it, because the Pigma Micron would stick on top of the gel but not on top of the gouache by itself. It was very strange, and it was a lot of trial and error for getting this all outlined, but I guess it was worth it because I really love how this page turned out. So I guess all of the trial and error and finickiness of the pens with the gouache worked out well. Once I finished outlining everything, there were just a couple of spots where the outline was inside of the metallic area, so I went back in with the gouache in another layer to make sure that the outline kind of covered the seam between the metallic paint and the gouache perfectly, so there wasn't any metallic on the outside of the outline or any gouache on the inside of the outline. My last little step on this page is going to be taking a gold paint pen, which is different in tone to both of the gold watercolors I used, which I quite like as it gives a bit of variation and depth to this piece, and outlining the places where the gouache either meets a different color of gouache or meets the white page. Basically anywhere where it looks like maybe there should be some black outlining, but there isn't, I'm going in with the gold paint pen and outlining instead. This was also a little bit finicky as the paint pen I have is slightly running out of ink, and the pen just wasn't cutting through the gouache as easily as I hoped it would, which is kind of the theme of this video. Pretty much every pen I tried had some kind of issue with either the gouache or the metallics that I was working on, but I ended up getting it done and got it done with pretty minimal wobbliness, which was great. And then I'm using that same paint pen to write the January title in a simple all lowercase cursive as well. I'm really sad that this paint pen is kind of running out of ink. This is one of the Archer and Olive Acrylograph pens, and they used to sell a lot of variety packs of these, but they haven't been doing that as much anymore, and I don't think that you can buy the gold one on its own at all anymore. So once this runs out of ink, I'm going to be out of a gold paint pen. I do have another one, a Posca paint pen, but it isn't as opaque and doesn't seem to play as nicely with a lot of the materials that I use in my journal. I still have used it on occasion, but I've noticed that it does frequently need to be reshaken to turn out more opaque. So I'm just really sad that this one's running out of ink because I don't think I'll be able to replace it once it does run out of ink. So if you have any gold paint pen suggestions, please let me know, as I will probably be in need of new ones soon. After the outlining with the gold paint pen is all done, there's just a couple finishing touches. I went back in with the black pen a little bit to cover up any of the places where the gold pen went over the black outline, and then also added the outline to the little planets and the sun and everything that are dangling from the moon. All right, we are finally moving on to the left-hand side of this setup. In my previous journal, I was doing a smaller calendar on the top half of the page and a little TBR table on the bottom half of the page, but I found last year that the calendar really wasn't working the way I wanted it to, and that the TBR table wasn't really as necessary as I thought it was the previous year that I'd been doing it. Since I started making book content last year and keeping track of my TBR in my videos and other ways, I found that the TBR table being in my reading journal as well was really redundant, but I didn't really know what I wanted to replace it with for a while. But then there was one month where I was reading more than 4 books at once and my calendar kind of fell apart, and I realized I needed to rework my calendar. I wanted it to be more kind of similar to my page tracker at the front of my journal, but more detailed since it was going to be on a month-by-month basis. So I extended the calendar quite a bit for the first time this month, and after I finished filming, I realized I wanted to go in and add some more dividing lines, so I did add in a line in light gray pen at every dot grid. So I essentially have 6 lines per day where I can keep track of what books I read each day, and also how long it takes me to read each book. We will see how this goes, but I'm hopeful that it will fulfill my needs and fix those issues that I was having with the previous way it was laid out. Alrighty, that's all there is to it, my January 2025 reading journal intro spread. This month is representing a lot of firsts for me. The first month with this new calendar layout, the first month of this tarot kind of yearly encompassing theme, the first month of me posting this on YouTube. I'm really excited for what this year will bring, and I hope you enjoyed journaling with me, and I'll see you again soon for some more journaling and bookish content.